So the beauty of self-storage is that our markets are really literally a 5 mile radius. That defines a market. No matter what major metropolitan statistical area or secondary, tertiary market you're in, your market is about a 5 mile radius.
So, you want to be a real estate investor, but where do you start? How do you know what information and sources to trust? That's where I come in. I'm Jonny Catani, and this is the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. Hey guys, real quick, before we start, go to investwithcatani.com and download my free ebook, Is Commercial Real Estate Recession Proof? Now to today's show. What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Jonny Catani, and we have a very special treat today. Mr. Scott Meyers is in the building. Scott Meyers and his affiliated companies focus on the acquisition, development, and syndication of self-storage facilities nationwide. Currently owns and operates over 2.4 million square feet and over 14,000 units nationwide. His education organization, selfstorageinvesting.com, provides courses, tools, live events, and mentoring to help others launch their own self-storage business to enjoy a lifestyle, as he coined, free from tenants, toilets, and trash. His various companies fund and build 4 to 6 houses each year in Mexico by taking his family, staff, and clients on an all-expense-paid short-term mission trip. Scott, welcome.
Mr. Catani, how are you?
So good. I have talked at length about my experience in Orlando. So your name is not new to the show. It was still very fun, obviously, ton of value, and we are excited to have you. So you've had a very storied career in real estate. I know this. You haven't always been in self-storage. Kind of just give us a quick backstory, what you were doing, and what you discovered the magic of this asset class and led you to where you're at now.
Yeah, so started in single family houses like many folks that first get into real estate. And I'm dating myself here. Some people have heard and remember the name Carlton Sheets. That was the first home study system I purchased that really launched my career, and then followed some of the other folks and went to our local real estate investor group and started buying single family houses, rehabbing them, renting them out, refinancing them. The Burr method, before it was called the Burr method, and one house became 3 and then 6, and we moved on up to about 75. Had about 75 houses, single family houses, that we were renting out. So we were landlords, and we were following that method. We were 15-year mortgages, and after 15 years, we'd sell off half, pay off the others, and then move on down the road with 15 houses. Well, that was we've taken a couple of turns since then. I didn't really like the tenant toilet trash business and slugging it out until we came to that point. So I wanted to speed it up a little bit, and felt economies of scale by getting into multifamily would be the way to do it. And it still is the way to do it. However, I still didn't care for the tenants and toilets and trash. All I did was buy myself more. And regardless of the property managers and the employees and the property management companies that we had in place, the buck still stopped here, and we just didn't care for it. And we were in decent neighborhoods. We were not in struggling or low income neighborhoods. It's just the hassles of dealing with tenants and toilets and trash. And so I decided that I love real estate for all the reasons everybody loves real estate, if it weren't for tenants. And so if we were going to stay in real estate, what could we do that didn't involve that? And then there's parking lots, vacant land, or self-storage. And there's not a whole lot of value you can create in vacant land unless you are developing on it. Same with parking garages, but storage is a different story. And we have the ability to create value in those, and buying distressed and undervalued, and adding income streams and raising rates. All the same things basically that we had with multifamily, except we didn't have to deal with all the challenges of people living in the properties. And so began looking into the asset class, and there really wasn't anybody and a lot of resources around 17 years ago that were teaching people how to find, evaluate, and purchase, manage self-storage facilities. And so I guess like any good entrepreneur, or maybe not even a good entrepreneur, but any entrepreneur will, if you don't find it in the marketplace, you create it. And so we learned on our own. And then we decided to create an education company to teach people and show them how we did it, and the lessons that we learned along the way. And so another company was born. And so through the years, what we've been able to do is really blend the two together. I've created an army of self-storage entrepreneurs that are the best in the business because we taught them about the best, using the best business practices and tools and resources. And then they bring us into projects. We wholesale buy them from some of our folks. We do joint ventures, we do partnerships. And now we built an incredible community of folks in our mastermind that is going out and absolutely taking the self-storage world by storm and taking names. So it's that's the, I guess, the long story or the short, however you want to describe it, over 17 years of how we got to where we are today.
I love it. That's awesome. And yeah, I can only imagine the changes you've seen. I mean, all the way from, of course, market and then investor sentiment. I mean, 17 years ago, what was it like talking to investors and potentially raising capital for like stepchild asset class?
Yeah, it wasn't easy except for the fact that we had success. I mean, any business is usually built upon your reputation, your testimonials, your case studies, depending upon whatever business that you're in. But, restaurants aren't very good unless they got, 4.5, 5 stars, and that goes for any business these days. And so we just had to prove ourselves, and that's what we did. And so when we can point back to the projects that we've worked on, whether it be single family houses, our entire portfolio and how we profited from that, and our apartments, our multifamily projects, it wasn't until that point that then people could see, well, if he did well there, most likely he's going to do well in this asset class. And the story was, that this is a little bit simpler. It's a more simple, predictable business model. It's not a simple or easy business by any stretch. None is, but coming from where we came from, there's fewer variables, and it's just a little more predictable. And we had been through inspections and really everything else. We were just learning a new asset class. And so, yeah, those investors in the beginning, they did take a chance with us, but they were the friends and family money in the beginning, as well as our lenders that took a chance, if you want to call it that, in the beginning. But true to form, we knocked it out of the park on our first one, and the second and third did extremely well. And after that, then it just it became a little bit easier for folks to come alongside of us because they could see that the profits were there. So I want to make it sound like it was easy. It was a struggle because there's a whole lot of folks that, especially at that time, it was, as you mentioned, this is the stepchild of the commercial real estate industry back then. And it's these metal boxes on concrete slabs, and, what if people hide dead bodies in it, and, meth labs and all this. And there was a little bit of a stigma to the industry back at that time that we had to overcome. But all in all, that just meant, every no was closer to a yes, and we had to knock on more doors and make more phone calls. But it all worked out. Yeah, that's how you find out what you're made of. And in a battle-tested business that goes through those struggles in the beginning of all sorts is one that is meant to last and endure, the recessions and anything else that the economy and the market can throw at us. And that's where we're at now. And I'm not pointing to myself, just our team. We've been there since the beginning, and we're looking forward to this next recession because storage does well, and we're ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It really is just that asset class. You look at the data. I've been really, especially obviously, economy's changing, like you said, really kind of putting that data from '08 to, kind of 12 out there in terms of, of course it took a dive like everything else, but look how quickly it rebounded. Yeah. And now I think it's set up even better to where you really won't see, you're seeing some negative, starting to see some negative, vacancies are ticking up and rental decreases, but not really in the markets that you're probably playing in anyway. I think I saw like Pittsburgh, York, kind of some of these bigger urban markets that people are moving out of. The cool thing that I like about it is you can, do a deal in some of these like really, really tertiary markets. What was the key for you guys in the beginning? Was it only primary? Did you kind of discover the tertiary as well, and kind of that scaling?
I think by default, we were looking in a 2-hour radius. In the very beginning, we were doing direct mailers and contacting the brokers and wanted to be about 2 hours radius from my home base in my office. And what I was looking at the time, the Class A or the REITs, the public storages, Extra Space, and at the time Uncle Bob's, which has now changed hands a number of times. Those are the properties and projects that they were running very well, and there wasn't really a deal to be had. I mean, in real estate, if you're buying an existing facility, the value add is in something that has not been run very well. It has deferred maintenance by a don't wanter, or somebody really took their hands off the wheel, and you don't find that too much in the more savvy operators and companies. And so that's what we were looking for. We were looking to build value. So we were looking at the mom and pops that had maybe a 5-acre parcel, but they only had buildings on 2 or 3 or 4, and they were happy with what they had. They were friendly with their tenants. They never raised rates because they were friendly with their tenants, and they didn't use technology, and so their payroll and their expense load was high. Those were the projects that we were looking for, and that's what took us to the secondary markets and into the tertiary. So we never got into really, rural markets where there's just no growth and not much happening. It needed to be in a market with enough size and scale to it that things were happening, and hopefully in the path of progress as well, because storage is needs based, and typically in a market that is transitioning or growing, or there's a lot of people moving in and moving out, all of that is good. But if there's not a lot of population and there's not much movement in it, then there's not a whole lot of value that can be created. So that's what took us out into those markets. And to this date, I think there's really only one facility that we own that is really in a major, considered the major metropolitan statistical area. Everything else is outside of it in the donut counties and the surrounding areas.
Wow, that's awesome. And just shows you, obviously, like you said, needs-based.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure throughout those years, kind of discovering some of those places where, you had, 2 facilities completely full, waiting lists, and, how quickly did you get into development as you were kind of discovering this along the way?
Yeah, it was about 2013, 14 is when we began getting really good at raising capital, private equity for acquisitions. Eventually most every investor runs out of cash to be able to do all the deals that they want to be able to do. And so we began raising private equity. And in order to then give them the returns in exchange for them giving you the money to invest, you have to be able to create a lot of value. And that isn't always there in existing facilities. And so once we got to the place where there's a lot of folks that wanted to come alongside of us, that's really what brought us into the development side. It wasn't the opposite, like many other folks, where they realized that, okay, out of the gate, they're going to start developing. And so in order to do so, they have to have a whole lot of capital lined up. Ours was the opposite. We had more money than we had deals. And so we had to go out and not only find them, but we decided to then create them. So finding the dirt, the good markets, the good locations, and getting in touch with our consultants, running the feasibility studies, and then moving forward with those projects to really feed our money pipeline so that our money pipeline didn't go somewhere else. So that's really what drew us into the development side of the business. And so we just hunkered down. We knew the operation side, and really everything else. Now we just had to really get a lot better at a detailed underwriting of a development project and the timelines and the timeframes in which it takes to be able to build and lease one of those up. But true to form, we surround ourselves with a really good team and knocked it out of the park on our very first development, which always helps as well. And then that opened up a pool of new investors to us that came alongside of our projects on the development side, because they were looking more for the wealth of appreciation and accumulation versus cash flow like our other investors and our other funds. So again, long-winded answer to your question, but that's what took us into development.
I love it. Yeah. That's a fascinating perspective. Like you said, right? Not necessarily jumping there in the beginning, more of a needs-based thing as you get into some of those institutional investors, private equity. You talk about your team a lot, which I love, because, that's really the key in this industry, right? If you want to scale, obviously, 2.4 million square feet, no easy feat. And of course, you are the first to admit you couldn't have done it without your team. What's been some of the main keys for you to develop this team, be able to vertically integrate across all of this and grow what you've grown?
Yeah. Well, there's no magic bullet, but I think what we learned along the way is that you have to hire based upon your culture. And if you don't know what your culture is and you haven't sat down and really defined what your organization stands for and the reason why you're in business and what you're doing it for when you get up in the morning and when your feet hit the floor, and how you plan to go about your day as you head into business, then how can you possibly hire or bring somebody else in? Because you can show them what that looks like and have them catch that vision and understand what your DNA looks like, but you can't teach it if it's not in them. So, ours is from the beginning has been mission minded and mission focused. And that means our students, this is our mission field, to bring people in, help them to avoid the mistakes that I made when I got into the business. We didn't have to start an education business, but we did. We saw an opportunity in the marketplace, but then also, when the tide rises, it lifts all boats. And we saw there's a whole lot of folks out there making big mistakes and making silly offers on projects that were bidding them up, which made it worse for all of us. And also, the investors around us that were failing at the first sign of anything in the economy that would begin to move one way or another. And so we felt that it truly is our mission to go out and create an education course and then a company to help people. And then if we help more people to do business better, those folks that we helped, they'll be able to do more business that they can do on their own, and they will bring us into that business as well, and to be able to do those joint ventures and partnerships. So that's essentially how we started going along that side and understanding just exactly where those needs were. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, or.
No, that's incredible insight, because what I love and what I really enjoyed, in Orlando is you guys are very principle based, which I am as well, right? So you started in the very beginning, right? You can't build anything unless you yourself, or maybe it's you and a partner starting out. I believe it was you and your wife, right? Unless
Correct.
you have your own principles and your own foundation, and nothing can grow from there. And that's really the where it has to start.
Yeah. So then the team grew after that as a result of growing kind of slow. We knew that we were growing an organization on the investment side as well as the education side, but we took a step back and looked at some of the mistakes that we made with regards to not hiring on culture. And so we went pretty fast, and we thought that we could teach that, only to find out that you couldn't. So we moved a little bit slower. We were more very, very. When we started doing testing with folks to make sure that we were doing personality tests to make sure that they fit our culture before we brought anybody into the organization, because the times that we hired somebody and they didn't fit, well, the rest of the staff let us know, and they said either that person goes or we go. And so we learned very quickly that that is the best way to build a team, which is to do it slow, but to do it based upon your core values. And so once we got really clear on that and made those hires, then that is what made the difference. And so now I'm blessed, and you got to meet some of those folks in Orlando. I'm blessed to be surrounded by some of the rock stars that we've spent the past really 10 years as we built out the team. We've been doing this for 17, but the past 10 years is when we really got dialed in and building this team, which is more like a family to us. And we're moving forward and finishing each other's sentences and knowing what the other one is thinking in our meetings and when looking at projects or taking things on. And there's something that happens. There's a little bit of magic that happens when these folks have been with you long enough that they feel comfortable to call you out on your BS and to say, hey, that's not the direction we talked about in January, so we need to stick to the course. And it's just better to have that accountability where everybody feels comfortable in being able to share and remind the other person that this is what we're here for, this is our mission, and this is our goal. And if this is outside of the box, then we need not do it because we've all decided not to. So that and for so many other reasons and so many other ways is why it's just important to hire somebody that fits, and then each person adds to that area of the business and better than you, and that you do it slowly to make sure that you are not making a wrong hire in the haste of wanting to grow big and do it fast, because that is usually a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's huge, because hiring is a skill.
It is.
As you get into this, you realize it's a real skill. And obviously now we have those tests, and you can kind of get some parameters for what you're looking for a certain position. And it's important to stick to that, because you get too into hiring your friends and people you like, and you don't get that complementary, right? Like you have a lot of strong heads, but it all complements all the parts well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, there's no BS in your, at least the team that I met. And I imagine that it kind of, goes through the whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's my ideal way. So I really resonated with that. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have grown and you've gotten your team to where you're at. What does your typical day-to-day look like as, you're not necessarily maybe having to be so in the business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so most of really things really changed with COVID for everybody, and that is really when our activity level picked up, which is also when I needed to put some key lieutenants in place so that I could remove myself from some of the more active parts of the business. And so now my typical day for the past year and a half, say 2 years, has really been the morning time is for me to make sure that I'm either tweaking the vision or doing the things that only I can do, just the things that I have to do in the business that I can't delegate and hand off to somebody else. After that, starting at about 11, I usually have one, maybe two meetings before lunch, and then I take lunch out, and that is for me again. It's not usually napping or eating for an hour, but it's time to do some other things that I need to either finish up from the morning or just stuff in the business that I didn't get to the other day. And then from 1 until about 3:30 or 4 are more meetings. So with the team, podcasts like this, and meeting with investors, investor calls. I'm on the phone, so that's the face-to-face, if you want to call it that, by way of a Zoom and or in-face meetings. And then the afternoon from 4 till 5 o'clock is emails and finishing up anything else that needed to be done for the day. And I do shut it down at 5 o'clock. It is very rare that I go beyond 5 o'clock in any day. And on Fridays, I'm out in the afternoon to either I have the choice of working if I want to, or usually traveling on a long day weekend, or sometimes part of that is going to a facility, one of these that I can drive to, and then taking a long weekend after that. Other than that, there is no typical week because I do travel a lot for visiting sites for our masterminds and our academies, although I'm scaling back on that these days as well. But spending a lot more time. I've got 2 kids in Phoenix, Arizona, going to college, so we spend a lot of time out there as well, and or on our mission trips. So, the day-to-day, the business side is pretty standard, but I'm out of the office about 2 months of the year just doing other things, whether it be vacation, mission trips, and then the travel with the business.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's obviously you've set yourself up to be able to do all of that, which is very nice. A lot of hardships along the way, of course. Had to take your lumps like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of shift now into actual self-storage here for a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, incredible asset class. What are you seeing macro-wise? Are you, any markets coming off your radar, new ones popping up? What are you seeing along those terms?
So the beauty of self-storage is that our markets are really literally a 5-mile radius. That defines a market. No matter what major metropolitan statistical area or secondary, tertiary market you're in, your market is about a 5-mile radius. So there's a lot of folks that will look at, an MSA and say, oh, Denver's a flyover for us, and we're done, and we're pulling out, of Pittsburgh, or we're moving away from this area or that area. And you can drop me anywhere, drop me like the little guy on Google into any map in the country, and I'll find an underserved market, a 5-mile radius within any one of those MSAs, regardless of whether the macro says that it is there's an oversupply of storage facilities. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm going to go looking for those. Specifically, you want to be in a market that overall doesn't have that. But if we've already got a presence in those markets and then it becomes oversupplied, it doesn't mean that we're pulling out. We're waiting for the rest of the folks to do so. But we're already more competitive because we got economies of scale, and we've got regional managers there overseeing multiple facilities. Our marketing is handled for one and for all because it's the same brand and the same name. So we don't move away from any of those markets for that reason. We just may not go into them in the beginning. None of those have really fallen off our radar right now, and that's also because many of the projects that we work on do come to us. They are brought by our brokers, our joint venture partners, developers that are merchant developers that are looking to us to raise the capital. The members in our mastermind and in our mentoring programs that are bringing deals to us to do joint ventures and partnerships on them. I don't take this for granted. I am very blessed and thankful that I have a steady flow projects that come across our desk without us having to do a lot of marketing and spending dollars and searching for those projects. So that is how our deals come into us. And then we back into the market. So we'll take a look at the deal itself and then look at the market. And within that 5-mile radius, what does it look like? And then the macro, what's going on in that market? Is it one industry dominant that is beginning to pull out and multiple companies in that industry are pulling out of this market for some reason? Or is there an influx? Is it in some of the red states where the lockdowns are still in place and people are moving out? We're staying away from a lot of the red states the blue states for that reason. So, just depending upon what's going on, that is what dictates, what area we go into, what market that we go into, is looking at trends and then looking at, the macro as to, is there anything that we can see as to why this market is unsustainable for any reason for, the next 5 years? And if the answer is yes, then we'll pass and move on to the next.
Yeah, makes perfect sense, right? Just really following the data, staying true. Like you said, obviously you guys have set up economies of scale in a lot of markets. So some markets that, maybe someone who doesn't have a presence yet, they've been looking to get into it, they would back off, but, that still leaves you guys obviously opportunity. Is there, I know none of this is ever black and white, right? There's always gray. It's always
not.
Rules of thumb as we head into this sort of economic shift that you guys kind of stick to and tighten up around.
It's interesting, Jonathan. We chatted a little bit about this in Orlando as we talk about underwriting. I mean, it's really all about the underwriting. I mean, there's an art and science to it, and that is, you could say that's where the rubber meets the road, and you can say that about multiple areas of investing in real estate and self-storage. But solid underwriting is really where it's at, and that is going to determine your projections, and how close you come to that is going to determine your success or failure. And so one of the things that we're looking at, it's a term that I've coined recently. Maybe somebody else has talked about it in the marketplace, but it's dynamic underwriting. We've got dynamic pricing in self-storage now, where the person in line rents a 10 by 10 for $64, and then the person behind them gets it for $76 and says, "What's going on?" And they say, "Well, supply and demand, just like the airlines. And if you don't want it, the guy behind you is going to take your price." So looking at our underwriting now in a dynamic fashion, understanding that that is true, and that is our lease up. No longer are we taking a flat line 2% increase in expenses over 3 years and a 3% increase in income, or just one flat. We know when we develop a facility, there's going to be a ton of marketing, and so that expense goes up in the beginning, and there's going to be a huge lease up in the beginning, and then it's going to taper off. We are going to get that economies of scale within the facility, and then let alone when it's folded into the ecosystem, things change. And so we're underwriting on a 6-month basis, so when we do a projection, a 5-year projection on a project, it's going to look different essentially from month to month, from quarter to quarter. And it has our lenders kind of, questioning and raising an eyebrow, but once we show them, they get it, and we've kind of taught them something in many cases, and they realize that they should be doing the exact same thing. So that's, I think the lesson and the approach that we're taking right now is that we're really not looking at anything on just an annual basis. I know that's how valuations are created, but what we do within each month and each quarter, if anybody's paying attention and looking under the hood at our underwriting, they're seeing, oh, this looks a little bit different. And, so we're dialing that in and spending the time to really predict, so that we can project what this project is going to look like at the end of 3, 4, and 5 years at our exit, because nobody wants to be surprised at the end of 5 years, including our equity partners and especially our lenders, if the numbers don't jive or aren't close to what we had set 5 years earlier.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's really great insight. And, obviously you guys are already by nature conservative underwriters. Do you get more conservative? Is that even a thing? Or, are you just pretty much stick to your core values when it comes to it, no matter what the economy looks like?
Yeah, I think there's some baselines in terms of percentages that are built in or baked into our underwriting model. Some things that we hold to. We'll back off a cap rate by a half to 1%. That's kind of automatic. We'll back down from the feasibility studies projections to make sure that we're hitting our marks, and we'll do our underwriting and our projections based upon that, especially to our equity partners. So hopefully, in each and every case that we beat our projections, because that's when investors come back and invest with you again. So yes, we have some of that is already built in. I'd say the only thing that we're maybe being a little more conservative on right now is our cash flow. And if we're not reaching, if we can find some of the lenders out there that on a development project that may go a little longer to wait before it breaks even, and but we're not, because we've seen what happens if you don't, and if you miss that by a couple of months, and then it's delayed on on the back end, 2 to 3 years into a project. Yeah, some of the challenges of not having enough cash flow is then magnified, and it's not 10x, but it produces a little more of a challenge for us. So we'll make sure that we've got a good long runway and that we raise enough capital to be able to weather that. And there's nothing wrong with raising more capital on a project, even if it sits there, as long as it meets the projections. We've got the money sitting there, and then it's just returned, and it means the returns are greater on the back end because that cash is given back as it was never deployed in the first place to make the project work. So I don't know if that answers your question. I guess the answer to all these questions is it depends. But as far as being any more conservative right now, I think more eyeballs, perhaps, as I'm searching, maybe more eyeballs on a project and more yeses from our staff and our consultants before we move forward on a project. Maybe about the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I know you guys have some, like you said, sort of your core things that you just stick to. Your assumptions are pretty much stay the same no matter what, which is really, like you said, one of the most important parts, and, kind of making sure you stick to that. Cool. Well, that was amazing. Thank you for that insight. We'll kind of wind down here and we'll jump to the final 5. Best advice you've gotten from a mentor?
Wow. Don't let the excitement of a deal trump the viability of it. I think we all, pride and ego steps in, and we tell everybody that we're going to do this and that. And if we don't reach those milestones, then we force a deal so that we can, spout off to everybody. And that is the wrong reason to get into a deal. That's
the truth. Yeah. My uncle taught me long ago, sometimes the best deals are the ones you walk away from. So
yeah, and Mr. Trump quoted that in his book, and I quote that very frequently, and that is true, because there's a whole lot of folks that wish they wouldn't have done that one deal because that was the one that took them down. They never want to do it again. Yeah. Yep, totally. What is about your career that makes you feel like you're fulfilling your why? Because we've been dedicated from very early on to take 10% of our profits in all our businesses and put them in a fund and take people on short-term mission trips, family-friendly mission trips, and being able to build, we're approaching 20 houses now over the course of several years, and introducing people to the mission field and having them go on and do the exact same thing in their own businesses, or start doing the same things that we're doing, which are taking them on those same trips and coming alongside of us. And so that's confirmation about once every 4 months when we go on a trip that we are fulfilling our why. This is a mission-based company, it always has been, and we're able to see that all the time. I love that so much. Yeah, it really is important to give. I know you're obviously very religious, and I like that a lot. Your mission, you have a few missions, and I love how much you dig into those and accept that for sure. Favorite non-real estate or investment related book? Favorite non-real estate or investment related book? Oh my gosh, there's very few of them that that I have read. The first one that comes to mind is the biography of Ayrton Senna. I'm a huge fan of Formula One racing. I love the business side of it. I love the sport side of it. I love motorsport, period. It's just a little different animal. And to get a glimpse into racing in the rain, and Ayrton Senna and the magic that he brought to his craft, and him being in the zone was a little different than anyone else, and he also being a faith-based racing driver, which is a little bit rare, and just the things that he could do in a car that nobody else has been able to match, and some people still wonder how he did some of those things, and just the guy was incredible. His business approach, his competitive nature about him, and just how he handled that and the teams around him is just an interesting read into not only him, his team, the business side of his, a little bit of history in Formula One as well. So yeah, that's probably one of my favorites.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. Ever since the Netflix documentary came out, I think more and more people are
oh my gosh
jumping back into Formula. I can't imagine how many people are like, oh, have you seen the Netflix documentary? You're like, yeah, I was into this before it was cool. So
yep. And that's one to watch over and over again. I mean, if there's nothing else on, you can always count on watching Back to the Future and the Ayrton Senna biography. You can find them both out there everywhere.
I love it. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh man, I have to keep it clean, right? Let's see. Gosh, here's the thing. I think I don't know if it's a superpower. I'd like to be able to do it now, but I hope that when we get to heaven that we can go back and be able to witness live historical events. If I had a superpower right now, that I could go back and watch just some amazing historical events. I mean, gosh, maybe it's the crucifixion, although that would be grueling. Famous sporting events. I mean, watching Babe Ruth hit a home run. Things that happened just before my time. Nobody would want to see the Hindenburg fall, but we've all seen those images, and just be able to help or see, or just to experience some of these incredible experiences that have happened throughout time, to be able to witness it live. How cool would that be? So I guess teleportation into wherever you want to go to be able to witness whatever you want to witness.
Yeah, that would be. I'm kind of a closet history buff as well.
Mm-hmm.
So especially when it comes to sports. So some of those top events, Game 7, these world.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
George Brett hitting a home run. I mean, come on, how cool would that be? Just watching that kind of stuff. That just
Absolutely, I love it. Cool. Last one. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you and learn more?
Well, that's an easy one. Selfstorageinvesting.com. That's selfstorageinvesting.com. That's everything under our umbrella from our mastermind to our education side of the business, and also the passive side for folks that want to invest alongside of us with their retirement dollars. All of it's there, as well as a lot of free resources to just learn about the business as it is our mission to give back.
I love it. You got a good one there. With the website. That's a great, easy domain. We'll link it in the show notes, make it super easy. Scott, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Jonathan. Appreciate
Absolutely. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Listen, I know it's cliche and you hear it all the time, but please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you know when the next video is coming out. Even though this is technically a daily podcast, it's coming out the next day. We have a ton of content coming your way. So please like and subscribe. It helps a ton. Leave comments. Would love to know what you guys think. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.